Escape from the asylum. I was about 10 years old, and on this particular night I found myself babysitting my 7-year-old sister, Emily. Our house sat at the edge of a thick forest, and beyond that, not too far away, loomed the ominous silhouette of the abandoned insane asylum. It was a place we'd heard countless eerie stories about, a place where the most deranged minds had once been confined. As darkness fell, our parents had gone out for the evening, leaving me in charge for the first time. Emily and I had just settled in for a night of watching movies when we heard a faint rustling from outside. I dismissed it as the wind playing tricks on us, but a feeling of unease began to gnaw at the edges of my mind. Minutes passed and the rustling grew louder, more persistent. Emily and I exchanged nervous glances, and I tried to reassure her that it was probably just an animal. But deep down, I knew something was amiss. Suddenly, the porch light flickered and went out, plunging us into an inky darkness. Emily clung to my arm, her tiny fingers digging into my skin. I fumbled for my flashlight, and as its beam pierced the darkness outside, my heart dropped. There, on the other side of the window, stood a disheveled figure, bathed in the eerie glow of my flashlight. It was a man, wild-eyed and gaunt, dressed in tattered hospital scrubs. He looked like he had just escaped from the asylum. Emily let out a small whimper, and I struggled to keep my voice steady as I asked, "Can I help you?" The man's gaze bore into mine, and his voice quivered with desperation. "I need to use your phone," he stammered. "I need to call the hospital." Fear gripped me, but compassion won over my dread. I knew the asylum was nearby, and if he was indeed an escapee, he must have been through hell to get here. I motioned for him to stay put and slowly stepped away from the window, guiding Emily to the back of the house where the phone was. My mind raced as I considered the situation. I had to call the authorities, but I didn't want to provoke the man further. With trembling hands, I dialed 911 and explained the situation, all the while keeping a cautious eye on the man outside. As I spoke to the operator, his gaze never wavered from the window, his expression a mix of fear and despair. Minutes felt like hours as we waited for help to arrive. The man remained on the porch, occasionally muttering to himself, his words incomprehensible. The forest seemed to close in around us, the trees casting long, ominous shadows. Finally, the distant wail of sirens pierced the night, and a wave of relief washed over me. The police arrived, along with medical personnel from the asylum, and they managed to coax the man into their care. As they led him away, he cast one last haunting look in our direction, a look that sent shivers down my spine. Emily and I watched from the safety of the house as he disappeared into the night, back to the asylum from which he had escaped. In the aftermath, the police assured us that he posed no immediate threat to us, that he was merely disoriented and desperate to return to the facility. But as I closed the door and locked it securely, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had just narrowly escaped a far more sinister fate. That night, the darkness that surrounded our home seemed even deeper, and the forest felt like a vast, unknowable abyss. The abandoned asylum, a place of torment and despair, cast a long shadow over our lives, a reminder of the horrors that could creep into our world when we least expected them. Months passed, and we tried to put the unsettling encounter behind us. Our parents reassured us that everything was back to normal, but the memory of that night still lingered like a ghostly presence. Then, one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the woods outside our home sank into darkness, Emily and I heard a familiar sound, the soft, eerie rustling of leaves against the window pane. Dread washed over us as we remembered that night, the night the escapee from the asylum had come to our door. I cautiously approached the window, and there, in the fading light, I saw it, a shadowy figure moving through the trees, drawing closer to our house with each passing moment. Emily clutched my arm, her eyes wide with fear. "What do we do?" she whispered. I didn't have an answer. Panic surged through me as I realized that the nightmare was far from over. The asylum had cast its dark influence over use, and whatever horrors lurked within its walls were now reaching out to claim use as their own. As the figure drew closer, I could see that it was not the same man from before. It was someone, or something, else, something far more sinister and otherworldly. Its eyes gleamed with an unholy light, and its gait was unnatural, as if it were not bound by the laws of this world. Desperation seized me, and I knew that we had to escape. I grabbed Emily's hand, and together we fled through the back door into the enveloping darkness of the forest. Branches snagged at our clothes, and the night seemed to swallow us whole. We ran deeper into the woods, away from the malevolent presence that pursued us. The forest itself seemed to come alive, the trees whispering secrets, and the shadows moving with a sinister purpose. Hours passed, but we dared not stop. The asylum's influence had taken hold, and we were trapped in a nightmarish labyrinth of trees and darkness. The sounds of pursuit grew fainter, but I knew that we were not alone in this haunted place. As the first rays of dawn broke through the trees, we stumbled upon a dilapidated cabin hidden deep in the woods. With no other option, we sought refuge within its decaying walls, hoping that whatever dwelled here would be less malevolent than the horrors that pursued us. Inside, the air was thick with decay, and the walls were adorned with cryptic symbols and faded photographs of inmates from the asylum. It was a place of unspeakable darkness, a place where the boundaries between this world and the next had blurred. We huddled together in the corner, our hearts pounding, as the night outside grew silent. The asylum, with its malevolent grip, had released us for the moment, but we knew that we were forever marked by the horrors we had encountered. Now, as I look back on that night, I can't help but wonder if the asylum had not just been a place of confinement for the deranged, but a gateway to something far more sinister and otherworldly. The memories of that night continue to haunt my dreams, a reminder that the line between reality and the supernatural is often thin and easily crossed. The asylum, with its dark secrets and malevolent influence, remains a chilling presence in our lives. A reminder that the horrors we faced that night were only the beginning of a nightmare that still lingers in the shadows, waiting to claim us once more. Whispers in the dark. When I was about 12 or 13, there was one fateful night that would forever haunt my memories. My parents had gone out for the evening, leaving me alone at home. I decided to stay up past midnight, sitting at my desktop computer in the dimly lit room, eagerly waiting for the comforting sound of their car pulling into the driveway. Little did I know that this night would descend into a terrifying nightmare. As the hours passed and the clock ticked toward the witching hour, a sense of unease settled over me. The house, usually so familiar and welcoming, felt different that night, foreboding, as if it harbored secrets it was reluctant to reveal. The soft hum of the computer was the only sound in the room, the glow from the screen, casting eerie shadows across my face. I tried to distract myself by browsing the internet, but an inexplicable chill ran down my spine. It was as if a presence had entered the room, something unseen but undeniably malevolent. I glanced toward the window, expecting to see the familiar headlights of my parents' car. Instead, I was met with darkness, thick, impenetrable darkness that seemed to press against the glass. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there, lurking in the night, watching me with unseen eyes. My heart pounded in my chest, and I considered calling my parents to ask when they would be home. But a sudden sense of dread held me back. I couldn't explain it, but the idea of making noise, of alerting whatever was out there to my presence, filled me with terror. Then, a faint sound caught my attention, a soft whisper, barely audible, like a voice carried on the wind. I strained my ears, trying to make out the words, but they were just beyond the edge of comprehension. It was as if the very air itself was trying to communicate something to me, something I couldn't understand. As the minutes dragged on, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. It was as if they were closing in on me, surrounding me on all sides. I felt trapped, suffocated by the unseen presence that had invaded my home. In a desperate attempt to break free from the suffocating fear, I decided to check the house, to ensure that all the doors and windows were locked. I crept through the darkened hallways, my footsteps barely making a sound on the cold wooden floor. But as I approached the front door, I froze in terror. The doorknob slowly turned, as if someone, or something, was trying to gain entry. Panic surged through me, and I backed away, my heart racing. I knew I had to hide, to find a place where whatever was outside couldn't reach me. I rushed to my room, locking the door behind me, and hid beneath the covers of my bed. The whispers grew louder, more frantic, as if they were searching for me, trying to lure me out of my hiding place. I clutched the blankets tightly, praying for the dawn to break, for my parents to return and rescue me from this living nightmare. Hours passed, and the relentless whispers finally began to fade. The first light of dawn filtered through the curtains, casting a pale glow in the room. I cautiously emerged from my hiding place, my nerves still on edge. When my parents finally returned, I tried to explain the horrifying ordeal I had endured, but they dismissed it as a child's overactive imagination. They couldn't fathom the terror that had gripped me that night, the sense of being hunted by an unseen presence. To this day, I can't shake the memory of that night, the night when the darkness itself seemed to come alive, when whispers in the night became a malevolent force, and when I learned that sometimes the most terrifying horrors are the ones we can't see but can feel deep in the marrow of our bones. And as I look back now, I wonder if those whispers were merely the echoes of something ancient and evil that still lingers in the corners of that house, waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to cross its path, to be drawn into the abyss of its unspeakable horrors. The Uninvited Presence. When I was about 8 years old, back in the days when kids were allowed to roam freely in our country neighborhood, I had an experience that still chills me to the bone. It was a sunny afternoon, and I had spent the morning playing with some neighborhood friends, running rampant through the fields and forests surrounding our home. Exhausted, I returned home earlier than usual and decided to take a nap on the living room couch. My parents, unaware that I had returned, assumed I was still at the neighbor's house and left for the store. They would be gone for a while, and I was left all alone in the house. At first, the solitude felt peaceful, the only sound the gentle rustling of leaves outside the window. But as the afternoon sun began to cast long shadows, an eerie stillness settled over the house. I drifted into a light slumber, the warmth of the sun on my face lulling me into a peaceful dream. But soon, that tranquility would be shattered. I awoke to the faint sound of footsteps in the hallway, soft and deliberate. My heart began to race as I realized that I was supposed to be alone in the house. Panic welled up inside me, and I called out thinking my parents had returned early. "Mom? Dad? Is that you?" There was no reply, only the echoing silence of the empty house. Fear gripped me as I realized that I was not alone. Someone, or something, was in the house with me. With trembling hands, I slowly sat up and peered into the dimly lit hallway. The footsteps had ceased, but an overwhelming sense of dread hung in the air. I knew I had to investigate, to find out who had entered our home. As I crept down the hallway, each step felt like an eternity. The shadows seemed to dance and twist, taking on sinister shapes that sent shivers down my spine. I reached the end of the corridor and pushed open the door to my parents' bedroom. The room was empty, bathed in a pale, ghostly light. I scanned the room, my heart pounding, and that's when I saw it. A figure standing by the window, its back turned to me. It was a silhouette of a person, but something about it was terribly wrong. I mustered the courage to speak. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" The figure remained still, unmoving, as if frozen in time. It didn't respond to my questions, and the silence in the room grew oppressive. I took a step closer, my fear giving way to curiosity, and that's when I saw its reflection in the window. A face twisted in anguish, eyes hollow and empty. It was not a person, it was a specter, a presence from the depths of the unknown. As I watched in horror, the figure slowly turned its head toward me, its empty eyes locking onto mine. Its mouth opened, and a guttural, otherworldly whisper filled the room, a language I couldn't comprehend, but that sent chills down my spine. Terror consumed me, and I turned and fled from the room, running as fast as my legs could carry me. I burst out of the house, gasping for breath, and looked back to see the figure standing in the window, its presence hauntingly etched in my memory. It was only later when my parents returned that I learned the truth. They had never left for the store. They had been home all along. The figure I had encountered in our house that day was something beyond explanation, a malevolent entity that had briefly crossed into our world, leaving me with a terror that would linger for a lifetime. To this day, I can't shake the feeling that there are forces beyond our understanding, lurking in the shadows, waiting for a moment to breach the veil between worlds and remind us of the dark, unfathomable mysteries that exist just beyond our comprehension. The years have passed, and I've revisited that day countless times in my mind, trying to make sense of the inexplicable. The figure by the window remains a haunting enigma, a reminder that the line between reality and the supernatural is thinner than we dare to imagine.